Justice, and I'm Lisa Cook, Senior Director of Career Services, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I'd like to just briefly introduce you to the Career Services Center. Our mission is based on preparing our learners to navigate career transition through educating, coaching, and advising them. Here's our Career Services team. From left to right, looking at the top, Dina Berggren, and then at the bottom, Nicole Skalski, who is running our slides and running the technical support for today's webinar, and Denise Pranke, who has coordinated and developed the content for today's webinar, and then Andrea Obricki, our newest career advisor. And so I would next like to introduce our guest presenters. Linda Kiltz is Walden's program director for several master's programs, the Master of Public Administration, Public Policy, and Master of Science in Nonprofit Management. Her interests include public administration, emergency management, and homeland security. She has 10 years in the profession of law enforcement, including positions as a training lieutenant, sheriff's deputy, crime prevention officer, and reserve deputy. Her professional organizations include American Society of Public Administration, Women in Homeland Security, Women in National Security, and World Future Society. Our next presenter is Dr. Mark Stallo. He is a Walden faculty member in the School of Public Policy and Administration. His interests include the nature and analysis of white-collar crime, computer crime, fraud against the elderly, and identity theft. His experience includes serving as in the Dallas Police Department for nearly 3 decades in data analysis, investigations, patrol, and training. And his professional organizations include the National Law Enforcement and Corrections Technology Center, National Institute of Justice, and Police Executive Research Forum. We have such a terrific panel. We're just so pleased to have all of these distinguished individuals on with us today. Next, we have Dr. Richard Warch, who's also a Walden faculty member in the School of Public Policy and Administration. His interests include international management, international governmental relations, and international comparative government. His experience includes 40 years in the profession of law enforcement, and he was elected sheriff of Charlotte County in Florida from 1988 to 2000. Next, we have Joseph Ellman, who is soon to receive his doctoral degree in public policy administration. His interests include effective and efficient production and delivery of services within local government and nonprofit organizations. He's had experience as a consultant, trainer, police detective, and adjunct college instructor. His professional organizations include, he's a member of the board of directors for the Mental Health America, Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences, American Society for Public Administration. And then finally, our last presenter is Dr. Kristen Beyer. She's the program director for forensic psychology, and she's also a licensed clinical psychologist. Her interests include evaluation and treatment of depression, anxiety, and adjustment issues. She has served as the Social Behavioral Science Research Coordinator at the FBI's National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime. She has conducted psychological assessments for the Undercover Safeguard Program and conducted evaluations for police officers deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan. Her professional organizations include the Society for Police and Criminal Psychology, American Psychological Association, and the American Psychology for Law section. So with that, and I'm out of breath from all those fantastic credentials at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Denise Pranke, who is going to start us off by reviewing today's topics. Denise?
Thank you, Lisa. Our topics for today's webinar are Explore Criminal Justice Careers and Trends, Look at Opportunities for Expanding Your Professional Network, and finally, look at ways to build your skills and experience. On the next slide, you'll see that the field of criminal justice has a broad reach with a wide array of opportunities. I'm going to name just a few job titles in each of these areas. In law enforcement, there are local, state, and federal opportunities. Police officer is often the first occupation that we think of, but keep in mind that there are many others. For example, state trooper, airport park and campus security, emergency dispatcher, criminal investigator, and intelligence analysts. Examples of opportunities in the court system are probation and parole officer, victim advocate, Corrections facilities are large with varied opportunities, such as corrections officer, recreation manager, pre-release program manager. Juvenile justice opportunities include intervention officer, youth advocate. In the field of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, work across a number of areas. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security and FEMA are large employers. They need coordinators, operations and logistics experts, public health professionals. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security is also involved in the prevention of human trafficking and child exploitation, as well as protection of transportation systems. Their website states that last year, special agents logged nearly 1 million hours working on child exploitation cases. A common job description in cybersecurity is IT specialist. Businesses, including insurance companies, need risk management and security experts. Private investigators may be hired by individuals or businesses, including insurance companies. Nonprofits provide a variety of services, such as victim advocacy, adult education, and guidance on transitioning from prison back into the community. Social and behavioral services include forensic psychologists, mental health counselors, social workers, educators, and work across all of these areas. Case manager is a common position for someone with a bachelor's degree. Every one of these areas need administrative professionals, and many areas are interested in conducting program evaluations to learn more about what is working and what is not. There is overlap and career movement between areas, and many job titles cross multiple areas. Based on responses from Walden graduation surveys, Walden graduates from the bachelor's and master's in criminal justice programs have jobs such as police officer, case manager, human service specialist, EMS supervisor, substance abuse counselor, youth counselor, dispatch manager. So next, what we'd like to do is launch 2 polls to hear from our audience to see what areas you're interested in. So we'll go ahead and launch our first poll. So please describe your experience level in the criminal justice field. Do you have no experience, less than 1 year, between 1 and 5 years, or over 5 years? So if you can just take a second and select one of those options, it'll help us know who's on our webinar today. So go ahead, and then when we hear back from you, we'll share those results. And let's see what we have. Okay, so 70% have no experience. And then it looks like no one has less than a year, and we have 10% between 1 and 5 years, and then 20% have over 5 years. So great, that's really helpful for us. Thank you for sharing that. So next, we'll go to our second poll. And what areas of criminal justice interest you the most? Law enforcement, the court system, juvenile justice and corrections, homeland security and emergency management, or business security, cybersecurity, investigations, or social and behavioral services. So if you can make a selection, that will help us as well. So there's just so many options with criminal justice, and it's just really a field that is on the move with a lot of opportunities. Okay, and then when everyone has a chance to make a selection, and you might be interested in more than one, just just decide on which one you might be the most interested in. So we'll share that. Okay, 10% law enforcement, 10% the court system, juvenile justice and corrections. And we don't have anyone on the webinar that's interested in Homeland Security and emergency management. But a lot of these fields overlap. So there can still be someone, you know, you might think of something else, but as we talk, all of a sudden you might go, oh, you know, I might really be interested in Homeland Security and emergency management. And then business security, cyber security. And thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's move on. And now that we have some response from the audience, I'm going to ask Dr. Kiltz a couple of questions. Dr. Kiltz, what trends do you see in the area of criminal justice?
I think there's a number of significant trends that we're going to see in the next 10 to 20 years, and I'd like to break them down in terms of demographic, organizational, and technological trends. From a demographic perspective, I think there's a number of significant things that we're going to see. First of all, we have an aging population. We will see a significant number of those over the age of 65 will increase substantially. And from a law enforcement perspective, that should concern us because the elderly tend to be higher victims of crime. However, there is a positive. They also are great advocates and helpers for those of us in the crime prevention field because it's the elderly that are often involved in neighborhood watch programs and their ability to work with us in terms of providing crime prevention education to children. So they're more likely to be victims of crime, but also at the same time they can also help us provide solutions to crime in terms of crime prevention. In addition, we will see a decline in the proportion of men age 15 to 29, and this is normally a group that's more prone to violent crimes, and so that could be a help to us in the law enforcement field because we should see a decline in that type of crime. And finally, a major issue will be in the next 40 years, we should see a substantive increase in the number of Latinos in the United States that are both legal and illegally here due to immigration. And that's of concern because we should be moving towards having more bilingual criminal justice professionals in our field, and we're going to have to adopt our organizational structures and cultures to be much more focused on multicultural issues. In terms of organizational constraints within the criminal justice system, as you know, in most local jurisdictions, they continue to be hampered by budget and fiscal issues. So many departments continue to downsize and, in fact, are decreasing the number of law enforcement officers that are being hired, but they're tending to civilianize their workforce as a means of cutting costs. So for those who are interested in a broad range of careers, such as in human resources, crime analysts, IT professionals, cybersecurity, white-collar crimes, more often are being conducted and assisted by civilian investigators and employees versus sworn officers. And then in terms of some of the technological trends, the technology is really fascinating in law enforcement, but some of the things you'll be seeing is a much greater use of video surveillance systems, particularly those with facial recognition systems to identify persons who are wanted. We're also seeing more video surveillance obviously put up in cities as a means of deterring crime. We're seeing more video surveillance in police cars. Now there are police officers who actually are wearing video surveillance systems, so as a means of capturing the day-to-day work of law enforcement officers. We're also seeing more and more nanotechnology devices that are used to detect everything from components in explosives, chemical and biological weapons, which again will have a great impact for police in trying to deter crime and to investigate crimes.
Okay,
so those
great.
are, I think, some of the major issues that you're going to be seeing.
Okay, and what should a person consider when deciding on a career path?
In terms of a career path for criminal justice and law enforcement, since those are jobs that particularly focus on the public sector, that I think the number one item is that students should have a public service ethos. That is a drive to want to serve the public in all kinds of working conditions. Usually the working conditions are long. You're working 24/7. many times, not often in the very best conditions. You're asked to work with individuals in crisis situations. And so you have to have a personality type that is patient, empathetic, has the ability to work with diverse groups of people, handle stress, have anger management, and be highly disciplined. And I think at the other, and so I think those are some of the most important things.
Thank you. It's helpful to know that. Thank you, Dr. Kiltz. And then we'll move on, and we have some questions for Dr. Stallo. Dr. Stallo, I know that you have a strong interest in the use of program evaluation, data analysis, and research. Can you describe opportunities in these areas?
Sure. Good morning. First off, more police departments and other criminal justice agencies are beginning to recognize the fact that data can drive activity and it can make them more efficient. So what the departments are expecting and policymakers are asking of folks in criminal justice is to analyze what's happening and to be more effective with the resources that we are given. And of course, those resources, as Dr. Kiltz mentioned, are reducing. And so as a result, we're finding that we have to do better with less.
Okay, great. What are steps that someone might take to get started in program and research?
Okay, so program evaluation in general, what organizations in criminal justice are looking for are what they're doing. Are they working? Are these programs working? Or how can we improve them? How can we make things better? So it requires someone to be kind of on the inside in order to understand the program and then to make recommendations. So practitioners have an advantage because of that, but academics, they want to work, you know, in the system also. So what my recommendation would be is to find a way to connect with someone in the practitioner world. And so the best role here would be a practitioner and an academic working hand in hand to be able to analyze programs, to make recommendations, to find ways to improve what police, courts, and corrections are doing. So, and then research in general helps to guide what's better. And I think that some researchers do a great job of looking at long-term research, and others, all they need to do is look at what's practically working in the criminal justice system and guide the practitioners.
Okay, great. And one more question for you, Dr. Stallo. How has your involvement in professional associations helped your career?
Okay, so for many years, I have worked with analyzing data and other types of investigative crimes. And by attending things like crime analyst conferences and criminal justice conferences, I have an opportunity to meet with people who are both practitioners and academics. And it gives myself and it gives them an opportunity to meet up with each other and to find common interests. And typically what a researcher is looking for is the data, and I think the experience of the practitioner, and the practitioner is looking for guidance on how to do a good evaluation and good research to help further their profession.
Okay, great. Thank you for those insights. We'll move on to the next slide, and we have a couple of questions for Dr. Warch. Dr. Warch, what advice do you have for someone starting a career in law enforcement?
Well, thank you very much, and good day to everyone. I was interested to see that we have 70% of our audience that has no career in the criminal justice system, but is very interested in it. And at the same time, of those that are joining us today, half are looking forward to being involved in the social and behavioral sciences end of it. But for the law enforcement perspective of a career in law enforcement, if one has the opportunity, as you're a student in this particular field, a good publication to look up is entitled The Challenge of Crime in a Free Society. I'll repeat that, The Challenge of Crime in a Free Society. It was a publication published by the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and Administration of Justice back in 1967. But it literally set the framework for which all of the criminal justice system today has operated over the last 46 years. And so one looks, when one looks at what they need to have for starting a career in law enforcement, one would look at the educational requirements, the physical requirements, what the background requirements are, and let me elaborate on a few of those if I may. If you're a law enforcement administrator today and you have 10 applications on your desk, the one thing you're going to look for is the individual that certainly has the most to offer the organization. And much of that can be found in the in this literature I was referring to, the Challenge of Crime in a Free Society, as to what is important to organizations over the last 46 years. So as you're the administrator looking at those applications, you're saying, who has the most to offer to this organization? And the one thing that that administrator is looking for is who has the best educational level. The other reason they're looking for that is that administrator, believe it or not, has to answer to individuals, whether they're the chief or the sheriff. And they're saying, you're using public funds. Why did you have 3 applications on your desk when you could have hired someone with this degree or that degree, and you hired someone with no degree? So the advice for someone starting a good career in law enforcement is to get a good job in law enforcement, get a good education. The next thing is that please make sure that you don't do anything to taint your background. Don't do anything that is of criminal nature, or don't do anything that's even submit yourself to the appearance of impropriety, whether it's on social networking or any other thing that could end up on the internet today that's going to show up in a background investigation. Because if it's embarrassing to the organization, that administrator that eventually signed off on hiring the individual is going to have to explain why they're now having an individual on board that embarrasses the organization. And that administrator is responsible for protecting the integrity of that organization. And there's just simply, again, going back to those 10 applications.
Yeah.
If one has no problem in that area, they're going to shine above those that may have a problem in those areas.
Okay, those are great points. And what qualifications are important for promotion?
There were 5 areas that you asked of those that were interested in. Of all those areas that individuals showed an interest today, those that have the most opportunity for promotion are the law enforcement areas, the courts, and the corrections area.
Mm-hmm.
And the other areas of promotions are somewhat thin because they just don't have the ranks built into the system.
Yeah.
But in dealing with the law enforcement and the corrections area, it depends whether we're looking for qualifications for line supervision, which would be the ranks of corporal and sergeant, or whether we're looking for mid-management, which would be the ranks of lieutenant or captain. And then we're looking for those qualifications that are responsible, that are necessary for those looking for administrative ranks, such as major and above. So all of those qualifications are somewhat different, but they all demand, let's look at the universal common denominator, but they all do demand that individuals have good leadership skills. And that is that people in the organization actually want to follow those individuals, that they look at those individuals and they have a confidence that they know those individuals know exactly what's going on in that organization. The other thing is somebody is going to have to sign off on those promotions, and the individual that signs off on those promotions are going to want to know that the individual they're signing off upon has the interest of that organization at heart, that they are there to promote the organization. I mentioned this not too long ago, but it's when MacArthur gave his speech to Congress, and he said the core, the core, the core. And so when you're an administrator looking at who's going to get signed off promotion and who's not, those that have the interest of the organization, the organization, the organization are going to draw the most attention.
Dr. Warch, those are great points. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we'll move on to our next presenter, Joseph Ellman. And Joseph, can you describe career opportunities that bridge law enforcement and social services?
Absolutely, and thank you. Welcome, everyone. I was also incredibly impressed by the poll earlier that indicated over 50% of our participants have interest in the social and behavioral sciences. There is great opportunity when we look at bridging law enforcement and the social services. On the traditional civil service side, we have juvenile justice opportunities, probation, parole, and corrections, especially the idea of community corrections and looking at considering how jails and prisons are running out of space, the expense in expanding those facilities. Community corrections becomes a field with great opportunity moving forward. Also, local and state policing. There is great attention on domestic violence, and many agencies, especially in my area, I'm in the Northeast, many agencies have placed into their departments domestic violence type workers, often a social service, or social work or counselor type employees. On the social service side, there are great opportunities in the nonprofit sector, including areas or organizations that specialize in domestic violence, mental health, homelessness, and juvenile justice. There's a great need for focus on the cycle that takes place between mental health or mental well-being, homelessness, and the criminal justice system. And often, if problems are not addressed ahead of or in an appropriate way before they become larger problems, then the criminal justice system becomes involved. And it's best, obviously, to keep it out, help individuals to stay out of the criminal justice system. So again, opportunities that look at or focus on mental health, homelessness, are of great importance when looking at the bridge between the two fields, law enforcement and social services.
Okay, great. If someone is interested in consulting, what should they consider?
They need to discover their passion, what their expertise is. There is great opportunity as well for people interested in the field of consulting. They need to combine their education, their background, and develop their brand. How we market ourselves, how we present ourselves as consultants really impacts our work. And you have to look at what you've done, what you've accomplished, and how are you going to put all that together, and then what is it that you want to offer to your client or to those that you'll serve on the other end.
Okay, great. And Joseph, what strategies did you use to find your adjunct teaching position?
Networking, which is also important for consulting. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. Same thing for my adjunct teaching work. Networking and the establishment of my credentials, which is both my practical and my academic experience. Certainly my studies at Walden have played an important role in my teaching. There are websites that help to guide someone interested in an adjunct teaching position. While a person who's interested can go to individual college or university websites, there are some that package it all together as aggregators, and that includes adjunctworld.com, higheredjobs.com, and indeed.com. Those three sites have been helpful to me in my pursuits of adjunct teaching positions.
Great.
Another way is to contact your local college or university and offer yourself as a guest speaker or a workshop presenter. That's often a great way to get yourself established with your local college or university.
Those are great points. And Joseph, just an additional quick question. What motivated you to pursue a career in criminal justice?
I grew up around it. I studied it as an undergraduate student. I grew up with, when I say I grew up around it, I had family members who were involved in law enforcement when I was a child. And I studied it. It was something I wanted to do for a long time, and that opportunity presented itself and developed into a great career.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for all of those points. And then let's move on to our next presenter, Dr. Beyer. Dr. Beyer, can you describe your career path in forensic psychology?
Certainly. Thank you, and welcome, everyone. I had a bit of a unique entree into the field. And what I tell students in terms of pursuing a path is to really engage in internship opportunities and to talk with people, seek opportunities within the field so that you have a better sense of the type of work, the nature of the work that you're interested in doing. So for me, I was in graduate school, and I was in an abnormal class, and I was reading a book from an FBI profiler regarding a criminal personality project that they had been involved in, and it really piqued my interest. This was kind of in the mid-90s, dating myself, and so I thought, you know, this is something that I think I would be interested in, and I contacted our local field office, FBI field office, and learned about internship opportunities, and I was really able to, I applied and was offered a position with their honors internship program, and that was really a gateway experience for me into the field and into an organization that from the outside seemed very difficult to kind of get a read on exactly what they were doing and so on and so forth. So that opportunity gave, the internship opportunity allowed me to talk with people who were engaged in the kind of work that I wanted to do firsthand. And so I did a 12-week internship with the FBI in their behavioral science unit. And then I went back to school and finished up. And when a position became available, that internship proved very valuable. They had posted a position as a violent crime resource specialist in the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, which you know, is a fairly popular unit. There was great media and marketing associated with that unit. There are television shows on it and movies based on it. And so while those are great media sources, it's important to understand the reality of the job as well. And the internship allowed me to do that. So when I applied for a position there, I was able to kind of really speak to the nature of the work. And it is quite different. I mean, it's obviously going to be much more entertaining on television. There's a lot more paperwork involved. Folks are a lot less glamorous, and we all flew coach. There was no private plane, so no jets flying us around. But, you know, I mean, what was important is that I was able to engage in really unique work, which is interesting for students, but there isn't a large opportunity. There's a lot of interest and not always a large opportunity. And what I tell students, first of all, is that where you have people, you always have the ability to apply psychology or certainly a forensic psychology degree. And I think our speakers today have talked about different opportunities within the juvenile justice system, child protective services, or the social service system. All of those areas require you would be very, you know, your skill set would be very enhanced by understanding forensic psychology, abnormal psychology, all of those psychological principles that can be applied in a lot of areas beyond a quote-unquote criminal profiling kind of environment.
Those are excellent points. Yeah.
And just, you know, just the line of work, having that opportunity with the federal government, it helps you to understand and gain exposure. And just, you know, for me personally, as a result of working there, I was involved in things as a psychologist. I'm a clinical psychologist by training, but that I never thought I would be exposed to. I was deployed to the Flight 93 crash site after 9/11 to provide employee assistance opportunities or services to our agents who were recovering crime scene evidence,
wow.
like that. So.
Well, thank you, Dr. Beyer. That's an interesting story, and thank you for sharing that. I'm mindful of the time that we have together, so we're going to move on, and then hopefully the listeners will have questions here shortly, but we'll move on to the next slide. And you've heard from our presenters in terms of the importance of building your professional network. So we want to take a closer look at some networking strategies. You want to think of networking as the art of building and sustaining mutually beneficial relationships and connections. Experts in career development say that approximately 70 to 80% of jobs are found through networking. So it's important to build and maintain a strong professional network throughout your career. Being active in a professional association is an excellent way to expand your network, learn about opportunities and trends in your field. Professional associations typically have an annual conference, and some hold smaller events throughout the year. So we advise joining a local or regional chapter if possible, and they also often have targeted career resources on their website, so check those out. A lot of times you don't have to be a member to look at their website and use the resources that they have. A few months ago, we posted a blog story about a student in the BS in Forensic Psychology program. She attended a local conference and met someone who was able to help her find an internship at a local nonprofit, and that internship led to a full-time job where she helps people transition from prison to the community. And on this slide, we listed just a sample of associations that you may want to explore. There are many others. And then moving on the next slide, with over 300 million members in 200 countries, LinkedIn is a powerful tool to build your network. On LinkedIn, you can connect with other professionals, research companies and jobs, learn about trends, and you can also review other people's career paths and their job titles. And here's just a sample of a few criminal justice related groups. So you can see we've got Law Enforcement Network, American Probation and Parole, Forensic Psychology on the next slide, the Corrections Connection, and Emergency Management. And then, moving on to the next slide, volunteering is an excellent way to gain new skills and experience. I know many of you don't have your foot in the door yet, so volunteering is a great way to try new things and discover your strengths and what you enjoy. You can meet other practitioners in your field. You can also include volunteer experience on your resume and talk about it in an interview. I've listed just a few organizations to get you started thinking about available opportunities. Citizen Corps is under the umbrella of FEMA. Their goal is to harness the power of individuals to make communities better prepared to respond to the threats of terrorism, crime, public health issues, and disasters. A Walden student we worked with was offered a paid position with the Citizen Corps as a direct result of her volunteering with the organization. CERT, or Community Emergency Response Teams, are also under the umbrella of FEMA, and there are over 2,200 registered CERT programs in the U.S. On the next slide, we have listed CASA, or Court-Appointed Special Advocates for Children, and they're a network of over 900 community-based programs that recruit, train, and support volunteers to advocate for abused and neglected children in courtrooms and communities. And then we have listed the AVP, or Alternatives to Violence Project. This is a global organization that originally started in the New York prison system in 1975, and now they operate in 32 states and 50 countries. AVP trains volunteers to facilitate workshops for prisoners in high-risk populations on how to deal with potentially violent situations in new and creative ways without resorting to violence. My neighbor is a passionate volunteer of AVP in Minnesota. She told me one of the most interesting aspects of the organization is that they role play what will happen upon release so prisoners can practice responding to situations in a positive way to avoid ending up in activities that may lead them back into criminal behavior. On the next slide, we have a few more volunteer organizations. There's Volunteers in Police Service, and they have more than 2,000 registered programs with more than 200,000 volunteers. And also want to encourage you to check the Walden Service Network for volunteer opportunities. And then Idealist is an excellent site to search as well. When I searched for criminal justice, I got over 1,100 results. So now, next, let's take some time for questions. Lisa, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do, Denise. Rhonda asks, can you provide advice and tips as far as building your network through connecting with practitioners in criminal justice who are working in an academic capacity? I think Joe might have hinted about that. So maybe Joe, if you could take that.
Certainly. Can you repeat the question, please, Lisa?
Okay. Basically, Rhonda's asking about how would you advise a student to network with criminal justice practitioners who are currently working in an academic capacity? What advice and strategies would you share for that?
The volunteer opportunities that Denise had mentioned are wonderful for making connections. And also LinkedIn. While LinkedIn may appear to be global, it really is a local networking, or provides for a local networking opportunity as well. Many of those groups have members that are local. Some of them have subgroups. And then there are often opportunities where people will get together in certain regional or geographic areas to promote whatever the interest is of the group. So I would say a combination in just establishing yourself and getting out there and speaking with others is a great way to begin the networking process.
And Lisa,
Excellent.
I'll add that most faculty will belong to professional associations in their field and attend the conferences. So that's a great way to meet academics.
Great, thank you. And a question for Dr. Beyer. You mentioned that you were involved in providing support to investigators at the crime scene post 9/11. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Certainly. Excuse me. In my role at the FBI, I had a collateral position within the Employee Assistance Program. And so I think what a lot of folks maybe outside of the field don't understand is that we have to make sure that our first responders and the folks engaging in that kind of work have good self-care and mental health. And so we were available to provide services to the folks who were on our evidence recovery team and were gathering evidence from the plane crash. And so things that would come up, just for example, is we had an agent who recovered a necklace that was embedded in a tree. And she was really struggling with that and recognizing that, just days before, that necklace had been around someone's neck, and just kind of the gravity of the situation. And so just providing that psychological first aid to make sure that the agents can do their job so that the job gets done.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Kiltz, I know in our earlier discussions we talked about ways that students could become more qualified through volunteering at law enforcement agencies. And could you talk a little bit about how one would go about doing that? For example, I think you mentioned that now it's common practice that volunteers would have to have their own firearm for that purpose. So I'm wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail on that.
Sure. There's a number of ways people can volunteer at local law enforcement agencies, and I started in that career by being a reserve deputy in the local county sheriff's department. And many departments use reserve deputies for various things, and what they require those volunteers may be different. For me, I worked in rural Montana that didn't have a lot of money, so we were expected to purchase our own uniforms and firearms. And the agency provided the training and the mentoring and the coaching that allowed us to become certified law enforcement officers for the state. So it basically made me that much more competitive when I applied for full-time work. Larger city police departments and other areas offer similar opportunities, but they provide all of the equipment and uniforms as well as the training. But there's also other non-sworn officer volunteer positions, often within the crime prevention offices or other outreach offices that people can be involved in as well. And I highly recommend the volunteering and getting internships as a means of getting skills in this area.
Great, thanks. And should candidates take CPR or any other additional types of training to be qualified? Certifications, for example?
It helps. I had first responder training, CPR training. I had taken courses in critical incident management, which are free through the Federal Emergency Management Agency. There are courses around in the event of emergency, what's the proper command structure, for example, for that. And so anything you can take to make it, give you a competitive edge beyond having an undergraduate degree in criminal justice, having a foreign language skill, having technology skills, having some of the courses in forensic psychology, given some of those areas that are growing having background in accounting and business so you can work in white-collar crime. Those are the unusual things that you might see in an application that help students stand out, in all honesty. So,
excellent. Thank you, Dr. Schultz. Great.
You're welcome.
Okay. Dr. Beyer, I have a question from Golden. Is there an age or physical requirement for someone interested in the forensic psychology area?
I'm assuming that that question is related to the FBI. Is there an age requirement? And I can speak to that a little bit broadly. If you are interested in being an agent, which is an 1811 position, there is an age requirement. You have to be you have to have gone through the academy before age 37 because there's a mandatory retirement of 20 years, so you have to retire at age 57. There is some possibility of extensions, but at this point, to be an agent, you have to be in before age 37. The other side of that, which a lot of folks don't necessarily know, is that through the the professional support side of the house, which is throughout the federal government, whether it's FBI, Homeland Security, Secret Service, what have you, there are lots of professional support opportunities, such as intelligence analysts, crime analysts, operations assistant analysts. There's lots of analysts, and those do not have any age requirements. You do have to pass a background check, but you can apply at any age. And those are called support positions, professional support positions.
Great, thank you. And so I think that's it for our questions. So those are terrific and very helpful answers, so thank you all. So Denise, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks for all the great questions that we received. Okay, moving on. We received this advice to share with you from Joe Mazza, a Walden PPA doctoral student with 25 years of experience in criminal justice, and he recommends develop your critical thinking skills, sharpen your communication skills, both written and verbal. They are essential. And you want to manage your emotions, learn to be patient, learn everything you can about the culture of your future organization, and just as we've been talking about here, his advice, build connections in your field and find a mentor to guide you if possible. And so next, we want to take a look at some resources on the Career Services website. So let's take a quick look here. We have extensive resources to help you with your career management. We have over 60 archive webinars on a variety of topics, including resumes and LinkedIn, which are often common topics that students ask us about. And then I'll point out a few specific areas on the next slide. To get started, explore the Resources tab, where you can search by sector. Corporate, the government sector is going to be probably a really interesting sector for you to check out. Also nonprofits. I know many of you said you were interested in social service and behavioral services. So check out the nonprofit resources that are there. And then you can also search by school/college, where you'll find some job boards specific to your area, along with some professional associations as well. And then under general interest, you can search for volunteer opportunities. So make sure you use those resources. And then on the next slide, we invite you to connect with us and continue today's discussion on our Career Services LinkedIn group. So join our LinkedIn group, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, and then we have a lot of Walden student success stories on our blog. And use the optimal resume system if you're working on developing a resume. There's a lot of great helpful tools there. And if you want to work further with Career Services, attend a Career Services overview or watch the archive Career Services orientation. And then everything from our website, everything on our website, you can get to it at careercenter.waldenu.edu or from a link from your academics tab. And you can always send us an email as well at careerservices@waldenu. And then moving to our last slide here, we'll leave you with this final thought from Theodore Roosevelt. Far and away the best prize that life offers is the chance to work hard at work worth doing. And with that, I want to say a special thank you to all of our guest presenters today. And thank you all for attending.